Okay. Right, apparently we are ready. So welcome to the December update. For those that haven't had the chance to meet me, I'm Ian Kenyon. It's my pleasure to be here today. I'm sorry I haven't got around to meeting all of you. There's lots of people on the live stream as well, so welcome to them. And I'm here with Rebecca, who I hope lots of you know, and Phil and Duncan. And apparently that mic's not working. Hooray! Right. Should we go from the top again? Hello, welcome to the December update. My name's Ian Kenyon. I haven't had a chance to get around the whole organisation yet, but it's a pleasure to be here. Rebecca's with me today, and we've got Phil and Duncan who are going to come and talk to us as well. There's about 100 people, I think, watching on live stream, so welcome to them. The first thing to say is, if you wish to send in questions, apparently, if you go on to www.slido.com or you go #B803, you can send in live questions. Have I got that right, Mariki? Jolly good. Right, so to begin, we're going to do a little bit on some of the research that we support today. There is a reason for a picture of a boat. Phil and Duncan are going to talk to us a bit, and then Rebecca and I will take you through some of what we've achieved so far, and that shouldn't have happened. We've also got lots of talking about the HR function today and some of the work that we're doing around the way that people transfer into UKRI. Now, question number one though, why does this keep flicking? And my favourite sweets are jelly babies. So question number one for a packet of jelly babies is, hopefully you all know this ship, the RRS Sir David Attenborough, is due to go into the water when? Sorry? When's it due to go in the water? Come on, somebody must know.
You can't get the jelly
Otherwise
babies.
Duncan will get all the jelly babies. Have a guess. April 18, that's close enough. How good is your catching? Right, it's actually, Duncan, is it March 18?
April is not a bad guess.
April's a good guess. Right. So on to the second slide, which is, you'll have seen it already, it's Bloodhound. This is Phil's, personal car. So, question for Wine Gums on this occasion is, how many children have enjoyed Bloodhound activities? Pardon? Somebody said something. 10,000. 500,000? Any advance on 500,000? Going once, going twice, going 3 times. Where was 500,000 come from? Right, I am hopeless at throwing. You're wrong by a factor of 4. It's 2 million. Apparently 2 million children have been involved in Bloodhound activities. Bloodhound is going to go at 1,000 miles an hour. For the good mathematicians, that means it'll do a mile in 3.6 seconds. And the final question for a packet of Starbursts is, and you should all get this, how long has Innovate UK been in existence? 10 years. 10 years, well done. Very good. Right. So, as I've told you, there's 4 of us presenting today. I am about to hand over the microphone, I believe, to you, Rebecca, to talk a little bit about the budget and the industrial strategy white paper. Do you need this?
Yes, I think so. Hello, can you all hear me? So I'm going to whiz you through. Next slide. Next slide. I'm going to whiz you through what we actually happened in the budget and the industrial strategy white paper. The first thing I would say is that I thought we did very, very well on a number of fronts. And we could not have done that without the input that we got from all of our colleagues across all of the councils and Innovate, who worked jointly as part of the strategy board to come up with some really good proposals that when it came to it in the autumn budget and the Industrial Strategy Fund were ready to go, and we were able to announce them. So the first big thing is the, next slide please, is the big, back one, two, that one. Okay, so the big thing is the total amount of money we actually got in the budget. So this time last year, in autumn 2016, we actually managed to get an extra £4.7 billion. And if you look at these light blue shades, that's the total amount of money. What we actually got this year in the budget is a further year's money, and the additional amount of money went up from 2 to £2.3 billion. Now, this is good for two reasons. One is the money's going up, and secondly, we've got another year to plan. As you all know, having as much certainty about the future is really good in ensuring we get really good value research and innovation programs. The other thing that was announced shortly before the budget by the Prime Minister is, next slide. There we go, stop at that one, so basically, there's a commitment that we will actually try and increase the spend on overall research and development by government and by business together to get to 2.4% of GDP. This is currently where we are, which is at just over 1.7% of GDP, and the commitment is to get us up to 2.4% over a 10-year period. Now, this is a very important challenge. It will require increased public spending, and we got the first bit of that in the autumn statement, but it's also going to require massive improvements in terms of business R&D. The work of Innovate UK will be absolutely essential doing that, but also it will require work across government on things like STEM skills, tax credits, regulation, to make sure we really get there. But this means that the future roadmap, which will be developed over the next year, is going to be really important to us, and we are absolutely critical as being one of the key players that's going to do this. It will absolutely put us on the forefront in terms of driving economic growth, improving societal impact, and absolutely critical to all of this, underneath it all, is making sure we have the good knowledge base. Now, in terms of what was announced in the Industrial Strategy White Paper, the most important thing was that the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, which we started last year when we announced £1 billion for 6 challenges, we announced another £725 million for further challenges, and these span the whole of the remits of the councils and Innovate, and are a really good way of showing that Innovate and the research councils are working together now to actually tackle some major industrial society challenges of our time. The new ones we announced cover energy, transforming construction, transforming food production, early diagnosis and precision medicine, healthy ageing, the audience of the future, which is very important, one of our first big creative challenges, and also quantum. Other things we announced were, next slide, the first time we've got, back again, next one, there we go, international, there we go, international. The next thing we announced, I'll just wing it without my charts. The next thing we announced is international collaboration, where we've actually announced a new £100 million fund to actually help form new international collaborations. When Sir Mark went to the States with Joe Johnson in September, they signed the first big US-UK agreement on research and innovation spending. There was one signed on China. This will allow us to develop new international collaborations, which will be absolutely critical in making sure we're well positioned over the next few years as we exit the EU. This money is not instead of any Horizon 2020 money or FP9 money, which is still being negotiated. It is in addition, it's a new fund. Then the next thing we announced was a new Regional Innovation and Growth Fund. This is something which we're working very closely with our colleagues in Research England, but the idea is that we try and spend some money to actually grow emerging strengths in R&D to actually drive economic growth and societal well-being, but very important that they're going to be based on existing excellence and where there's high-quality innovation. So we're not going to try and grow clusters where there is no strong base to grow them on, we're going to try and grow them on that strong base. And then, next one, and then the one thing that we did, which was basically with the money left over, is that we have said that we want to have what's known as a Strategic Priorities Fund. Now, this is not as well developed so far, in particular because we really want to keep this money to look at new ideas, new strategic priorities that cut across the councils, cut across Innovate, incentivise and fund interdisciplinary work. There'll be further work to develop that over the next year, and they'll be working across all the councils to think of new ideas, you know, new cutting-edge stuff. It's all the things we haven't thought of so far, and that was announced as well. Then the last thing we announced, which I'm not going to talk about so much about now, is because Phil's going to talk about it a bit, is that we did have announced a new talent fund to fund more PhDs, more early career fellowships, and more chairs. The important of that is I think that was probably one of the strongest areas of really good cross-council working. And with that, I'm going to hand over and let Phil talk about that a bit more. Is that okay? Oh, sorry. Oh, no, sorry. You're going first, Duncan. What do you want? All right. Go Phil first. Okay.
Thank you, Rebecca. And I think it's worth saying, actually, that the great result we've seen from that budget settlement is in large part due to Rebecca and her team, who have worked really well in corralling all the Research Council inputs together and making really strong cases up to government. So I think big round of applause for Rebecca and the team who've done that. So anyway, so it is all a very bright future, I have to say. We haven't seen anything like this since, I think it's 1979, since we got this sort of uplift in budget. So really it is a great opportunity. But I think we're also conscious that it also means a lot of hard work, that certainly across the councils we know that people have been working exceptionally hard this year and put an awful lot of effort in, especially into some of the new funding streams that have come on. So the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund and so on and so forth. Perhaps just a few words about that. What's been really good from my point of view is seeing the sort of teamwork that's gone in across the organisation. So when we've seen people from different councils and Innovate come together and put together really strong bids into the Industry Strategy Challenge Fund, and that's been really helpful in making sure that we can land these terrific settlements that we got out of government. But I was really asked to talk about the talent side of things, and John Saville and I have been leading a work stream on that, and we were delighted. We got 300 million, I think, allocated for developments in research talent. John and I started actually at what we thought was a pinch point in the career development path of academics, which was the sort of future leaders aspect of things, where people are really wanting to launch a new academic career, and we probably, obviously we do our best in the councils already to try and support such aspirations, but we wanted to have a real good go at doing that and beefing up the sort of offers that we could make in a very flexible way. And so we're sort of, we're well down the track now in working out how that might work. But again, it's going to take a lot of cross-council working to deliver it on behalf of UKRI. So that's a great aspect of the new talent fund. The other two dimensions to that, which Rebecca mentioned, one is looking at the sort of PhD level training and the sort of KTP approach that Innovate have used, and actually trying to get the best features of both of those schemes to try and come up with a sort of flexible, we're calling it a scholarship scheme, that we might work up. We're conscious that that will be quite different to what's going on at the moment, so we're going to take some time over that and work up again a lot of consultation across council before we launch anything in that. In the meantime, we'll be doing KTPs and PhDs. Again, we were delighted this year to get 1,000 extra PhD students. That was great news that we got, and across the councils. So that's all heading in the right direction. As Rebecca rightly said, government's got a real emphasis on talent development at the moment, and that's going to be really important that we deliver those new funding schemes. The third of the funding streams was really for very senior academics. And again, councils have done a lot of this in the past, where we're recruiting or helping universities recruit very, very senior, experienced people. And we're in discussion at the moment with the national academies about all these funding streams, actually, to make sure we have a consistent package across the whole offering from national academies and the research councils and Innovate, so that we can put together a big picture that really does look a very, a cohesive and compelling argument for making sure we continue to invest in research talent. So again, that's tremendously exciting. Lots of great things to be thought through, but again, not underestimating the work involved, because all this is extra. It's new work, it's new ways of doing things, but I think we're off to a flying start in UKRI, and I think there's a tremendously bright future for the organisation as a whole. So just a word of thanks from me. I know in my own council people have worked tremendously hard on a lot of these things, and I'm sure it's true across all the councils, so thank you so much for all the work you do, because I think it's been a great effort, especially during this year. I won't speak for any longer. I'm going to hand over to Duncan to let him reflect on what he sees as the future.
So thank you very much, Phil. I was asked to actually talk a little bit about open access and also say a few words about how a Research Council Chief Executive understands the new world. And actually, if I was to pick out a couple of the taglines here behind me, one would be a unified voice, and the other, I think, would be maximise our impact. The important thing, I think, to understand about UKRI compared with the past is how big we're going to be. And that means two things. One is that we're going to have a much more clout, but it also means that we're going to need to take, as it were, more responsibility and show a greater degree of leadership, both nationally and also internationally. So if I just pick on the question of leadership, Open Access is a very good example. Most of you, I'm sure, will know that the councils embarked on what was then a fairly radical open access policy about 5 years ago, and that policy has been pretty transformational in the effect that it's had both nationally and actually, more importantly, internationally. So 5 years ago, 20% of all academic articles in the UK were Gold Open Access, and that number has moved in the 5 years of our policy to some 37%. Not only that, we have seen other movement internationally which is sort of following us, but we are still world leading. And that is in part because of the enormous reputation of the UK science base and its journals in the world internationally. Nonetheless, what has also happened is that the bill for publishing has gone up, and to some extent we are on a difficult path if we continue as we are. So the question then arises as to what we should do. And here, I think, is a very good example of how the clout of UKRI can allow us to be somewhat more ambitious than was the case in the past, and to think about how we now take the next step and move from 35% open access to around 70. So there was a paper that went through EXCO just a few days ago, where we will take a long review next year of our open access policy. And no doubt the exam question for us will be, how do we take the next step? How do we continue to show international leadership? And how do we use straightforwardly the clout of this new organisation, UKRI, to enable us to introduce more change than has perhaps been the case in the past? I think the other thing I'd like to touch on is this question of maximising our impact and how, as it were, a council that should understand this new world and respond to it. I don't think there's much doubt, and we've just heard why, that there's considerably more opportunity, in fact, roughly speaking, twice as much opportunity as there used to be with the arrival of UKRI and the great success that's just been remarked upon about the increase in the budget. Nonetheless, this isn't more of the same, and along with the budget has come a larger challenge. With these kinds of sums of public money come responsibility and comes a need to deliver more clearly than perhaps has been the case in the past. So I think that the question for people like me is, how do we, as it were, configure our organisations in this new world? And in that respect, we have a more or less one-off opportunity to reconfigure our organisations, in the sense that we have lived with structures of councils and boards more or less for the last 50 years. And we now have opportunity to think through quite fundamentally how we should structure ourselves for this new world. And if there's a word that is perhaps worth just observing to you about that, I think that word has to be generosity. We have been good at councils at ensuring the quality of our own domains. We've been perhaps less good at understanding larger scientific agendas that run across councils. And although people like me in the past have been good at saying we're good at this, actually we're probably not as good as it as we could be. And UKI provides us a marvellous opportunity to do that if we can think more broadly and more generously than we have in the past. And that, I suspect, is probably the biggest challenge for us as an organisation and organisations in understanding how we engage with all of us in order to get this gain that is there, the prize that is there of even greater science than we've been able to deliver in the past. Does this have implications for all of us? I think it does. I think it means that we have to rethink our priorities. We have to move a bit from a world where we've just been, as it were, in control of our budgets to a newer world where we're both in control of some and attempting to influence others by joining together. And I also think that we need to get better at understanding the nature of the largest scientific challenges in front of us and how we bring our communities together to respond to them. There is, I must say, in the 5 years that I have, 6 probably, that I've been doing this job, the one thing that has frustrated me slightly is that the structures that we had didn't allow us to move together in a way that could respond to some of the largest scientific challenges. I now think that that opportunity is in front of us, and I personally strongly believe that we should grab it and continue to be the best research councils in the world. Thank you.
Brilliant. Right, this one's on. Brilliant. Thank you. Excellent. So lots and lots of good stuff, and there's been lots of good stuff going on. To give you a chance to ask questions, has anyone got any questions? And anything coming in from questions from outside? Anyone got any questions they want to ask at the moment before we talk to you about progress so far and then go on to some of the transfer and the ways in which transfer of all of us happens? You've got a captive audience here. Don't let them get away with it. No, very tame. Right. Rebecca, we're going to talk then more about what have we achieved so far, and probably more importantly, what have we still got to achieve? Do you want to start, or shall I start?
Yeah, do you want me to start?
You start.
Okay. So, I mean, I just want to say, sort of go through some of the things we've done so far. You know, before I do, I want to say a huge thanks to everyone who's really helped out on all of the work on the implementation programme. I know that a large number of you are very heavily involved in a lot of the strands, plus also all the people who've helped out in all the strategy work that we did for the autumn statement. We're now at Christmas. We are aiming for day of the 1st of April, and we have achieved an awful lot. Not all of it will be immediately apparent because obviously some things are still being worked on and they're coming to fruition. But I just want to run through some of the big things. I'm sorry, the other thing I want to say is that with all of these things, a lot of the things will sound like they're very at the top. And that is partly because some of the really immediate things you need to do is to get the top structure in place and get the governance in place, and then work through the whole of the organisations to bring everyone on board. So, I mean, the first thing is that we have appointed a board, which is good. We've got a CEO in Sir Mark, a chair in Sir John. I'm delighted that Ian has just started with us. With executive chairs, we now, I think, have got 5 of the 9 appointed, or shortly to be appointed, and another 4 shortly to go on. Everyone should know exactly who is going to be their executive chair within the next 6 months, and there is a really strong plan to actually get that all done. We've had our first 2 board meetings. which were very lively. The board is very, very positive, very, very invigorated. They've got lots of really good ideas. One of the first things they want to do is try and get out and meet you all. We're going to have our board meeting in January. We're going to have it in Harwell, so they're actually going to be on site seeing a lot of the science. And then we're trying to organise a number of trips out. The implementation programme is working really, really well. I'm not going to talk too much about the HR stuff because Michael and team are going to talk about it. But we're making very good progress with the COSOP process where 7,200 of you will automatically transfer on day one. But also in the setup of the Research England, where they've got their council in place, and David is building his team in Research England, but also the Strategy Director and some of the key posts under Ian. As I said, we managed to get our first set of advice to ministers in October, and this had a major impact on the outcome of the budget and the Industrial Strategy Challenge, Industrial Strategy White Paper. And now we are sort of moving forward to transition to get to day one. And as we've always said, that we see this as a two-stage process where we transition everyone into the organisation. So we're up and running on day one. There's an awful lot of work on the HR side. There's an awful lot of work on the governance side. So both in terms of working out the internal governance of UKRI, but also working with our colleagues in BEIS to ensure that going forward we have a very strong, positive, collegiate, friendly atmosphere with them to actually make sure we work through all of our issues of joint interest. As part of that, we're writing a very dry document called the framework document, but that will actually outline all of those issues. From then on, one of the key things that Ian is going to work on is working on what the transformation side of it looks like. And I don't know, Ian, if you want to say a few words about that.
I think all I can say about transformation at the moment is it's not a word that we should be afraid of. I mean, I think it's evolution. There's certainly nothing revolutionary planned. I think as we come together, my sense would be we should look at opportunities to do things better, opportunities to build our careers, opportunities to collaborate more, opportunities to be generous with one another, because I think that it's in that way that we will be more effective. And I particularly pick up on some of what Duncan was saying. To have more money, suddenly we become really rather relevant. And actually, it's quite apparent how much money we've got to spend. And I think that brings an obligation on us, which we, and I certainly intend to help, need to just respond to. So I'm looking at this as being a really great opportunity to develop ourselves and to develop our careers and to develop the way we go about business and to make work fun. It's really important that what we do supports. Certainly from the support function, supports all our scientists and gets the maximum out of this money. So coming from Cancer Research UK, where every pound that we spent was actually a pound we'd been given, I'm really aware of actually how important it is to make certain that we do everything with responsibility. So that's why I would say it's an opportunity.
And the other thing I would just add, especially in my point of the world, is I am so incredibly grateful for the comms teams, both in RCUK but across all the councils who've been working together incredibly collectively. One of the things we said we really wanted to achieve through UK Research and Innovation is have a single unified voice for research and innovation, both internationally and nationally. One of the reasons why Sir Mark can't be here today, he really wanted to be here, but he's unfortunately been summoned to Sweden to do something with some sort of Nobel Prize somewhere or other. So he's actually doing that at the moment. But the comms teams together have done a really good job of the new website, working together on a Twitter account, working together on thinking about our new brand. And that's another really good example of very close cross-council working to actually make sure that the UK Research and Innovation has the best possible start.
I'd pick up on two other things that Rebecca said. One, you mentioned the board are going out to Harwell for the board meeting in January, and they are coming to Swindon at some stage for the board meeting as well, I think. Is that February? February. So, they very much want to get out here. And the second is related to Swindon. We have made really good progress on a new London office. So we are not in a position to announce exactly what we're doing yet in London, but there has been some good progress, and so at some stage we will be able to say more about that. But that's also important. You know, from my perspective, it's great to be here. Thank you for the enormous amount of work that's gone on today to this date. I'm sort of the fraud coming here after about 2 weeks, and I'm standing up here. But I do know there's been a huge amount of work to get us to this stage. So, unless there are any questions, which there are, there's a question. And if you think my eyesight is that good, Mariki, then... So, there is a question. Do you see all the individuality of the councils being dissolved, or will some parts be retained? Why don't we ask one of the research exec chairs to take that?
It's a good question, very fair question. I think I would expect to see an awful lot of the individuality of the existing councils to be retained. I think when we first started on this journey, we had quite a lot of interchange, in fact, with Joe Johnson directly from the chief executives of the current research councils. And I think one thing we said was that the great strength of the current system was the 7 disciplinary-facing councils, that we actually had different communities with different ways of working, and that was a real strength to preserve that. And I think Duncan is absolutely right that what we need to do now is make the most of the opportunity of doing better working together. I think that was the perception that Paul Nurse had, and I think a lot of it, as Duncan said, was we had to work very hard to make sure our own disciplines were healthy, that we were having to put the cross-disciplinary working sort of on the back burner the whole time, and that was certainly my perception too. So I think the new world needs to have both the disciplinary strength that we already have, and I hope we will retain, as well as making sure these opportunities for cross-council working are really taken up. I think the new strategy fund, emerging strategies, I forget, strategic priorities fund, is a fantastic opportunity to do exactly that. So to see where we do have sort of scientific problems at the interfaces between disciplines, and there are more and more of those that are becoming apparent, then we should really make the best of the opportunity to work together. So my answer is absolutely retain the disciplinary strengths, but build on those to make more of the combinations.
Fantastic. Thank you. Any other questions? Somebody's broken the ice, so come on. There must be another one.
You can ask us anything at all.
No. Like what I want for Christmas or something like that? No. Okay. So we recognise as well that there are some other areas that we need to do more on. So there's more still to be done on brand. I mean, I think Rebecca's talked about comms, and there's still quite a lot of work to be done on brand. There's lots still to be done on IT and on some of the sort of the research frameworks in terms of grant systems and things like that. So that's all work in progress. As somebody who's just arrived and got an address of EPSRC, and you go to Bayes and they sort of say, well, you can't see your calendar. We know there's lots of stuff to be done there. But the most important thing to do is about us as people. So we are going to dedicate about the next 20 minutes or so to Michael and his team taking you through a lot of the detail as to where we are now in terms of people transferring from existing councils into UKRI. And then at the end of this, there will be some workshops that you can actually go on. We'll obviously take questions if there are questions. So I'm going to hand over to Michael, who's going to, with his team, lead us through that. And then I'll be back at the end for final questions and the wrap-up.
Okay, thank you, Ian. I suspect I might not get off quite so lightly on the questions front. I've already had one thrown at me as I was standing up. So we move on to the HR section, most riveting agenda item this afternoon, but hopefully we can give a little bit more reassurance today as to how this process is going to work, what it means for people, what it means for your jobs, and what you can expect to see over the months between now and go live on the 1st of April. What we will be going into today is some complexity over the HR process. There's no getting away from that, so we do want to start addressing it with you now. Equally, I do understand that a lot of this will be quite technical, will be quite complicated. I think that's the nature of the beast when you've got so many such different organisations coming together into one. So we'll do our best to field questions as we can, but if you feel more comfortable, we have the breakout session after this, and we'll have a number of drop-in sessions in the weeks ahead leading up to Christmas and after, where you're very welcome to come and talk to us, and we'll do the very best we can to answer your queries. In terms of what we're going to look at today, if we move to the next slide, we're going to look at the process for transfer, which, as Ian has already said and Rebecca mentioned, this is via the staff transfer scheme that Steve will talk you through in a minute, covered by something called the COSOP guidance, which is Cabinet Office Statement of Practices. We'll take you through that very briefly. We'll then also look at the people transition. What do we mean by that? What are we covering? What will we be delivering? What will we be working with you on? Then we're going to look at something that's dear to all our hearts, which is our pensions, and how are they going to transfer? What does that mean to everyone moving forward? And then finally, we want to look at right-to-work checks, which is something, unfortunately, we're going to have to do as part of setting up the new organisation. And I think Steve is going to pick up on that with you as well. So I'm going to hand over to Steve now, and he's going to talk to you about staff transfer.
So my name is Steve Robinson-Murray, and I'm picking up staff transfer, pensions and data. So if we look at the staff transfer, as Michael said, under the HERA Act, we will transfer people through a staff transfer scheme. So the transfer scheme actually lists the people who are going to transfer, the areas and the functions. So that's built into Schedule 10, getting into the detail. Schedule 10 actually lists how we will transfer people. There's a similar arrangement in terms of how we transfer property, etc. So that means from the 1st of April, employment rights will transfer over to the new organisation. So employment rights will transfer on the staff transfer scheme on the 1st of April. So one of the big questions I've had with working with the current HR population is COSOP. Why COSOP, not TUPE? So TUPE applies where there's a transfer of employment rights, but within the public sector we use COSOP. COSOP's been around since 2000. It's a well-trodden path, and we use the staff transfer scheme to list the people. So with COSOP, what happens is your current terms and conditions or your employment rights, etc., will transfer, including trade union recognition, will all be listed in the scheme in terms of the rights, asset, liabilities of you listed as employees will transfer over to UKRI on the 1st of April. There's been some discussions around people on different dates, but everyone will transfer on the 1st of April. And the protections under TUPE and COSOP are the same. So that's the overarching principle. Probably the most important question, who will transfer? So we use the 7,200. So far the program's had data in terms of the number of people. We've not had any individual names or details about the people. So all we have so far is a data drop. We just requested a new one at the end of November, and we'll get that early January. But there's circa 7,200 people in scope to transfer. So the people who are in scope to transfer should have recently received a letter from the HR teams, which outlines some details about the transfer, but also there's some guidance and there's some frequently asked questions. So that's available. If you've not received your letter, I think the point of contact is your HR department, but we've put on the information hub the guidance for you to refer to. We've also got people coming from Research England, and I understand their letters will be issued shortly, so they're slightly behind just in terms of the people in scope. And we've got people from BEIS, so again, conversations with BEIS around the function that are transferring and the people that are transferring over. What will happen later on, 28 days before the transfer, we will get employee liability information. That's the first time UKRI will get details of the actual people. It'll be your name and a unique identifier, probably your staff number, Oracle number, just to identify you, and that will be listed on each of the transfer schemes, one per organisation. So throughout all the COSOP process, we've had lots of engagement with the trade unions, and it probably will continue to data transfer. I noticed George from the trade unions nodding vehemently, so we'll continue to the 31st of March, and then we'll recognise the trade unions in UKRI world. So that's all part of the process, and even today we've started to talk about the format of the recognition agreement with the unions. So you have a joint consultation committee, which is what's currently been happening with the current employers and their trade unions and the Innovate staff representatives. That's carried on before UKRI came onto the scene and will continue until the 31st of March. There is a new joint negotiating consultation committee, which Michael leads, and that's UKRI talking to the trade unions about the transfer and what happens post-transfer. And there's the functional transfer that BEIS HR and BEIS management are having with their trade unions as well. So ongoing consultation with the trade unions, the communications are written in conjunction with the trade unions. We're also working with the HRDN network in terms of the process for the COSOP transfer. I'll now hand over to Charlotte and Shiloh.
So I'm Shiloh Russell and I'm working on the People Transition work stream. So to establish UK research and innovation and deliver the essential activities, we do need to fill some key roles prior to day one. Information on these functions has been published on the Information Hub, so you should all have access to those functions. So to fill the new and vacant posts and ensure that staff are treated fairly, we have set a range of principles which we've talked to unions and HR colleagues in the councils about, which will be applied to filling roles. As stated by our senior Shadow UK Research and Innovation leaders in all of their communications, it's not anticipated that there will be any compulsory redundancies as a result of the transfer of staff to UK Research and Innovation. And we are aspiring to ensure that all of our staff get appointed to a job that they want and that they're appropriately capable of. So filling posts will be using one of three kind of methods. So there will be lift and shift, job matching and recruitment. So lift and shift is where all staff in the research councils, Innovate UK and Research England will transfer to UK Research and Innovation in their current roles. For most people, this will mean that there's little change as a result of the transfer and they'll continue on doing their current job and work. Ooh. Job matching. So job matching is the process through which we look at the current roles and compare them with the new roles in research and innovation. If a member of staff's current role is matched to a new role, they will either be appointed to the role or undergo a competitive process to be appointed into that role. And then the final process would be recruitment. So it's anticipated there will be some new roles, which will be in corporate services, strategy directorate and international shared capabilities. So this means that there will likely be some roles which are open to staff to apply for. Recruitment will be in a three-stage process. So we will go for an internal process first, which will be open to the research councils and partner organisation staff. If that's not successful, then we'll go across Whitehall for a competition and then an external competition which is open to the general public. I'll now hand over to Charlotte to talk you through the next phase.
Thank you, everybody. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about the matching process that's due to be published later on this afternoon. So we've split the matching process into a couple of phases, and the first phase that we'll cover will be in relation to RC UK staff. So presently there are staff that are in substantive posts within RC UK, and these individuals will be matched into new roles within UKRI. Staff on secondment in RC UK will continue their secondment and return to their host organisation once that secondment ends. And there's an additional tier where secondments for staff in RC UK may run past the 1st of April, and we stand by that the secondments will continue to run until the end date that has been specified, and then the individual will go back to their host organisation. So the matching process for staff that are within the Shadow UKRI Strategy Directorate and Transition Programmes. So these staff will return to their parent organisations upon the end of their secondment, as the majority of these roles were recruited on a time-limited basis. And James is now going to talk to you about the BEIS transfer element. of the matching process.
So as Charlotte said, there are also some functions from BEIS which are going to be in scope for transfer to UKRI. We've been working very closely with Michael and the Shadow UKRI HR team to make sure our processes are aligned as they can be. So anyone in BEIS who is doing a role where 51% at least of that transfers over to UKRI, they will be in scope for COSOP transfer. The situation is slightly different for BEIS employees. Obviously, BEIS will still be in existence, so people who are in scope for transfer from BEIS will have three options. That will be, they can take up their COSOP right and transfer over to UKRI. They could decide to come initially on secondment, or they could turn down their right to transfer over, and then they'd be redeployed in BEIS. We've got a number of vacancies in BEIS at the moment, so we're quite confident that we can do that without there being any need for anyone to be doing anything they don't want to do. There's this thing called EU Exit going on, which we've got quite a few jobs for. So we have got a lot of vacancies where people could be redeployed in BEIS if they decide not to transfer over. Now, the important thing is people need to make a decision about whether they want to transfer over by the 21st of December. So by that stage, we'll know exactly how many people from BEIS will be moving over to UKRI. And once that process has been concluded, the resultant vacancies which aren't coming over with people can then be advertised and competed for. So potentially even more opportunities for people. So that's the key things, really. I'm now going to hand back over to Charlotte.
Thank you. Okay, so to give a little bit more detail about the matching process that UKRI will be adopting. So the matching process will consist of a matching panel and it will be for them to make a decision regarding whether a role matches into a new role within UKRI. Panels will be made up of 3 individuals, which will include a functional expert, HR rep, and an independent member of staff, which will be someone outside of the business area or a trade union representative. In terms of matching criteria for the matching process, so in consultation with the trade unions and HR colleagues, a decision has been taken that the matching criteria will be based on a role that is greater than 50%. So if a new role is similar for more than 50%, then that would be deemed as a match. So some further detail in terms of what a panel might decide. So the panels will make the decision, obviously, on whether roles match to new roles within UKRI. There's potentially 3 outcomes, which would be 1 individual matches to 1 role, and as such they would be offered the position. More than 1 individual matches to 1 post, and therefore there would be a ring-fence competition. In circumstances where 1 individual matches to multiple roles, then the individual, so the employee, will be able to state a preference of which role they'd like to take up, and that will be considered as part of the options. If there are no matches, then those roles will be put out to advert for recruitment purposes, as Shiloh's previously explained. In terms of panel decisions, so the panel will obviously make the decision of whether a role is matched or not. As part of this process, individuals do have the right to appeal those decisions, and those appeals will be purely based on whether a matching decision has been incorrectly made, so whether someone has matched or not matched, or on whether the matching process was followed as stated in the document that will be published later. I shall now hand back to Steve to talk about pensions.
So pensions, the overarching principle is there will be no change on the 1st of April. So because of UKRI, nothing will change in terms of current scheme members and people who are in the pension scheme up to the 31st of March will stay in their existing scheme. So on the 27th of November this year, the Treasury approved the Research Council pension scheme can continue. So that scheme will continue, and it's likely April 2019 alternative arrangements will be made in terms of moving the benefits over to the civil service. That's all a future decision at post-go live. The Medical Research Council pension scheme will continue. UKRI will become the principal employer, so we will own the scheme. And UKRI will put a board member on the pension trustee board. That scheme will also allow new people to join, so MRC is slightly different. And we've also got a host of other pension arrangements that will continue in legacy format. So we have people who are in the Merchant Navy, the Atomic Pension Scheme, and again, legacy pension members, so current members will be able to stay. UKRI will be a civil service pension scheme employer from the 1st of April. We've applied to join the scheme, that's been accepted, and we're now working with the payroll providers to make sure the records can transfer over for new entrants from the 1st of April next year. So the immigration work. So work is undergoing in terms of UKRI has applied for its licence for the Home Office. What we're now working on is the process to validate all the people's right to work. So working with the retained HR functions, communication will go out shortly in terms of what that process looks like, how that process will be carried out, and what forms of identification people will need to meet the right to work checks. I'll hand over to Michael to do some wrapping up and final questions.
Thank you. Just in terms of where you can go to for additional information, you'll all be aware of the Staff Information Hub. On there, there'll be regular updates from HR on org design, on all the processes we're running, and have briefly talked to you today. So do please look at those. And equally, we're in CS16 here in Polaris House. You know all our names now, so if you want to drop us an email, by all means do so. We have got a few questions. I suspected there might be a few. We've made it in actually under 20 minutes. So if we kick off into the Q&As. So I'll share these around, can't have all the fun myself. But in terms of first question, we have, how will harmonisation be handled as the RCs have different grades, pay and conditions? And is there a date by which we will know this? Well, as part of the work that we're doing, we're working with our trade unions and across all the councils to look at how we can start to harmonise, how we can look for middle ground in our pay ranges, in our grades, and work out how we can start bringing people together. So it's not a new pay system in that respect, but we are looking for common ground to try to bring 9 organisations together into one. In terms of when that will be done, we are aiming to have that all done for day one. So we are looking to hire new individuals on UKRI terms and conditions for the 1st of April, if at all possible. The next one we have got, which I will give to Steve. When will individuals in the RCs know if their job will be moved into a UKRI section? In fact, it's probably more Charlotte.
Okay, so in terms of when individuals will know if they have a job, so know if they have a job that will be moved into a joint UKRI. So as we're working through a number of the structures at the moment which have all been published on the hub, so you've got the high-level corporate structure that's already up there, and also currently the strategy directorate is up there. So as we start working through the recruitment element of those sections of the organisation, we will then be making contact with all of the council's HR departments to get an understanding of who does what roles and whether there is their potential for matching, or if there isn't, then again we'll follow the recruitment process as outlined earlier. So it would be an internal competition first, then across the civil service, and then externally. As we go through that, it will be a work in progress, so it will be continually evolving and moving forward. So there won't be specific dates for people, but as soon as that happens, we'll let you know.
Okay, I've received a question which says, why are base staff being matched first? In essence, they aren't being matched first to the new structure. So what's happened is, on the base side, we've obviously had to identify who's in scope for transfer. Now, that is based on what people are currently doing. So, as I mentioned earlier, 51% of their current role is moving over to UKRI, they have a legal right and protections in employment law to move over with that role. That doesn't mean that they're being matched to a specific job in the new UKRI structure. So we're currently working through, as I said, who has a legal right under COSOP to move over to UKRI. Those base staff will make their decisions by the 21st of December. Once that has happened, they will then be matched to roles in the UKRI structure at the same time as everyone else. So it's not a case of base staff being matched first. We are just looking at who is in scope for COSOP transfer because they have that protection under employment law. And if we are in a position where we do have potentially more than one person, potentially a skills match for one role, we then will look at some sort of ring-fence process to decide who gets that role. So just to confirm, base staff haven't been matched to roles first.
So the question I have is around when will UKRI T's and C's and pay be available? And this links to people being interviewed now to start after the 1st of April. So there's a meeting on the 20th of December with the trade unions to try and firm up the detail in terms of the T's and C's. But the working assumption is we will use the harmonised terms and conditions until something different is in place. So that's the plan as of today. We'll update you after the meeting on the 20th.
Okay, I think that takes us through all the questions that we've received so far. I'll take it to the floor now if anyone has any questions they would like to ask us. Elsa, I think I can see in the back there. Do we have a roaming mic? I think a mic's just coming.
I've got two questions to ask. So the first one is, on the job matching process, will you be using people's current job descriptions? And if you are, have you informed all the 9 councils or organisations to ensure that their staff job descriptions are up to date so that it's a fair process for people?
Yes and yes. So, yep, absolutely. We're using the substantive job description of the post that you're in, and we've been working with the HRDs and various other people across the councils to try to locate those job descriptions and make sure they're all up to date.
Second question is in terms of anybody who's on a secondment post the 1st of April, if they go back to their council and their post has already been filled and there is no post available for them, what will happen to that individual?
So we're working on that at the moment. So we'll be looking at everyone's substantive post. If they've been recruited to, say, RCUK, for example, as their substantive role, we'll be looking to identify an appropriate role within UKRI as quickly as we possibly can. So we know that those individuals are out there. We know that the buckets of activity, if you like, that we've identified don't quite capture absolutely everybody at this time. We know that. So just to reassure people who are in those very small amount of posts that we haven't quite yet sorted out, we are aware of it and we will come back to those people as quickly as we possibly can. Are they not? I was just to say, somebody said we've got a text that says the questions aren't working on the live feed. So, okay, I can repeat the questions. We'll continue, we'll try, but thank you. Yes? Yeah, absolutely. Shall I give it to you, James?
Yeah, it might be.
Okay. The question was, can we say more about the functions of the transferring from Bays into UKRI?
So I'll just take this one because it happens here. But I think they fall into 3 buckets, really. So the first is advice to ministers on allocation of funds. Now, that previously was done by Bays, so basically deciding on how much money went to which councils and which was the best pot of money to go for and any new schemes. Previously, Bays officials would take the lead on that. Now, what the Act is very clear about is that going forward, one of the functions that will the UKRI organisation and the board will do will be to give advice to ministers for those allocations. Ministers will in the end decide, But what we've agreed with our BEIS colleagues is that the primary place where that advice, that analysis will be done will be in the UKRI strategy unit. We'll obviously share all that information with our BEIS colleagues, but work that had previously been done on BEIS on allocations would now primarily be done in the UKRI strategy unit. The other thing I would say is that previously BEIS had essentially 8 different sponsor teams, so all of the councils had a sponsor team who looked after them and looked at all their particular issues, and they did it with 8 separate teams. Now, what we've agreed with our BEIS colleagues is that actually you don't need 8 teams to do this. What they're going to have is one single team who will actually be the sponsor team in BEIS, and as a result, some of the work that those teams used to be done will now be done in the centre of UKRI. And then the last thing is that there are some elements of policy where we think there's one of the big advantages of having UKRI is that it can be done once in UKRI. And these are things like eligibility for grants, the thing that Duncan was talking about, which is open science, open data, open access, equality, diversity, and inclusion. So where previously that was done in BEIS because there wasn't a single way of doing it, we're now going to make sure that's done once, and we're going to bring those functions together. Mike might have asked this question because he works in international. One of the things that we haven't decided to do for day one is to look at the international functions. That's mainly because everyone is so incredibly busy with EU exit. Obviously, there's an international team in RCUK at the moment, and essentially what's going to happen to that is it's going to lift and shift and work to Andrew Thompson as the international champion. And then the international teams will carry on in BEIS, and the international teams in BEIS will be leading on EU exit. And at the moment, they're very, very busy and sucking up all resource that can possibly be made. Now, going forward, especially when we know what happens as a result of EU exit, we might want to look at the international teams. But at the moment, for the international teams, it's pretty clear-cut. The RCUK ones will lift and shift and go to Andrew Thompson, and the BEIS ones will largely stay as they are. So that I think, is basically the plan. Mike, you happy with that, yeah? Okay. Thank you for back.
I think we have a few more questions coming in. First one here is ring-fenced interviews. What happens to the person who doesn't get the role? So they will revert back to their substantive post. So where there is a new post, people have been matched to, whoever gets the post will move into that role. The other person will revert back to the post that they're in currently. Next question is, how does the 50% matching compare to other COSOP events? Well, generally greater than 51% match is the criterion that you would use under a TUPE process, and as COSOP is in essence TUPE-like, that's where the 51% has come in. And equally, we want to give people the maximum opportunity to demonstrate their skills in a variety of different roles. So the 51% has been designed on the back of that, and in my experience, that reflects very, very many transfer that we've done previously. So it's very much trodden ground and an established criterion. The next one, I can see the word pension, so that looks like Steve, which is how can the MRC pension scheme be open to new entrants when everyone will be employed by UKRI? Who will be entitled to join the MRC scheme?
So the MRC pension scheme is cheaper than the civil service. So in terms of the benefits, there's a 6% cost increase if we moved into the civil service pensions. And also by having new members going into the scheme, it helps in terms of the full funding approach, and it will be the centres, institutes and units, and not MRC headquarters, people who will go or be allowed into the MRC pension scheme going forward.
Right, any more questions? Yes?
Okay, just out of interest, what kind of level of autonomy will UKRI have with regards to how they spend their funding and how will they interact with BEIS?
Shall I take a go at that and then Rebecca can bail me out when I get it wrong? It's still up for negotiation, actually, at the moment, and it's one of the fundamental bits of work that is now, I think, at the level of Permanent Secretary Bay's debate. The chairman of UKRI, Sir John, is very involved in that conversation. I think we are hoping to get as much freedom as is sensible, and then my sense would be we earn our right as well to keep that freedom. So, the more that we are able to demonstrate that we're completely in control of it, the better that will be. But we also have to recognise, as Rebecca has said, that ministers make a lot of the decisions, and we need to respect that. So, so we're looking to get a lot more freedom than councils have at the moment, but still recognising that Bays will still have to have a certain level of sign-off. Please correct me.
I think there's sort of several levels to that question. The first is, to what extent do individual councils have basically delegated decision-making vis-a-vis their research or innovate funding in their own specific areas? And the answer to that was the ministers was very, very clear during the course of the HERA Act, and this was actually confirmed by the board at their first board meeting, which is where it's an innovator or a research council discipline-specific matter, then we would expect and we intend to delegate the decision-making down to the individual councils. The only things that should be sort of considered at the UKRI level is when there's cross-cutting approaches or synergies, which are where it's better to do. So the idea is that, as a principle of subsidiarity, the councils should get as much authority in its delegation as possible vis-a-vis their own spend and their own budgets. The one thing that we are looking at the moment is, as you know, there's loads of rules and regulations about recruitment, pay, terms and conditions, business cases for spend. So to what extent can business cases for spend be approved without recourse to Bays or recourse to HMT? We're in the process, and this was the bit that Ian was referring to, we're in the process of, as part of work on the framework agreement, looking at whether those rules are fit for purpose or whether, as a benefit of UKRI, we can actually get more freedom and flexibility in terms of how we do things within UK research and innovation. I think it will be an interesting process, but we're going to try and make, I think a key principle is we want to try and make it as easy as possible and to get rid of as much unnecessary bureaucracy as possible so that everyone can focus on the really important thing, which is to spend the money well on research and innovation.
Right, unless there's any other questions, there was an awful lot there on the HR front, and I'm sure that a number of you will probably have questions. As I listen to it, I think the key is the majority of people, if I'm correct, lift and shift, which is not very elegant terminology, but most of you continue to do the same job that you're doing today, and nothing changes. There are obviously those where things do change, and that's what we've tried to explain today. The assembled cast here are available directly after this for the drop-in session. There's some other faces up there as well. So, please do use them. They'll also be around for the next few weeks as we go through the process. So, I would encourage you, where you need to go and talk to them. These stand-ups, I hope you found today useful. We are now intending to put them into the diary on a monthly basis. So the next one will be on January the 18th. They are planned to happen on the third Thursday of the month, but I'm not expecting you to remember the third Thursday of the month every time, so we will obviously make certain that you're well aware of them. Obviously, if you've got questions between now and then, there are lots of places to post questions. Questions at ukri.org is a pretty good start. Equally, if you see any of us wandering around, just nab us and ask questions. I'm sure I could say the same for Phil and Duncan, that we're absolutely available to have questions there. The other thing you asked for previously was a a chart on an indicative timeline, and the eagle-eyed of you may have seen a big chart going up there. That's got on it the sorts of things that have to happen between now, March, and into the first quarter, and second quarter, and third quarter of next year. We'll keep that up to date. It won't change every month because it's probably quite expensive to print that, but that's what's there, so please have a look at that. I think that's all we have got to say today, except just to reiterate a massive thank you from all of us, Phil, Duncan, Rebecca, myself, Mark, if he were here, for the enormous amount of work that you have put in so far. There's a small little thing called Christmas coming up, so please go and have a fantastic Christmas, celebrate in whichever way you choose at Christmas time. There's loads of work to do in the new year, but for now, let's celebrate a fantastic 2017 and actually look forward to a really great 2018 and the creation of UKRI. So our thanks to you. Please ask us questions afterwards, but please also have a great time with your family and your loved ones over Christmas. Thank you very much.